All right. Well, how about we pick back up with Cigars, Whiskey, and Winning Leadership Lessons from General Ulysses S. Grant. Yeah. We left off on leadership lesson number 5, which was, but can they think for themselves? And let's move on to number 6. That's right. Academic achievement is an unreliable indicator. Grant was anything but a stellar student. He graduated 21st in his class of 39. Persons acquainted with the academy know that the Corps of Cadets is divided into 4 companies for the purpose of military exercises. These companies are officered from the cadets. The superintendent and commandant selecting the officers for their military bearing and qualifications. Grant did make cadet sergeant rather, but he had so many demerits that he was demoted and served his senior year as a private. And once again, since I flubbed that, Grant did make cadet sergeant, but he had so many demerits that he was demoted and served his senior year as a private. The lesson: academic achievement, or lack thereof, is by itself an unreliable indicator of future accomplishment. When interviewing for entry-level management positions, you need to look beyond grades and test scores. It is more important to hire individuals who are intelligent and eager to learn your business, and who can be expected to exercise good judgment and work well with others, than it is to hire academic superstars. Moving on to number 7, on claiming credit. And this is a huge one. I've dealt with a lot of leadership, and they don't like to ascribe credit to those that it is due. So I am very interested here. After graduating in June 1843, Grant was commissioned as second lieutenant and assigned to an infantry regiment. In March 1846, Grant's regiment was ordered to the Rio Grande. War with Mexico broke out in May, and in one of the early engagements, the Battle of Rasaka de la Palma, May 9, 1846, Grant, in command of a company, led a charge. There was no resistance, and we captured a Mexican colonel who had been wounded and a few men. Just as I was sending them to the rear, a private came from in advance of where I was. The ground had been charged over before. My exploit was equal to that of a soldier who boasted that he had cut off the leg of one of the enemy. When asked why he did not cut off his head, he said, "Someone had done that before." This left no doubt in my mind but that the Battle of Rasaka de la Palma would have been won, just as it was, if I had not been there. And here is the lesson. Don't kid yourself into believing you made more of a contribution than you actually did, and never claim credit when none is due to you. Come down hard on any of your subordinates who try to take more than is their fair share of credit, because if you don't, you will be sending the message that you can't differentiate between the deserving and the undeserving, and that you will demoralize your entire organization. Yeah. All right, let's move on to 8. The Folly of Swearing. In August, Grant was assigned to act as a quartermaster for his regiment. Pack mules were hired to transport the Army's supplies through the mountainous terrain of Monterey. Grant was in charge of the pack train and found that managing mules was challenging. Sometimes one would start to run, bowing his back and kicking up until he scattered his load. Others would lie down and try to disarrange their loads by attempting to get on top of them by rolling on them. Others, with tent poles for part of their loads, would manage to run a tent pole on one side of the sapling while they would take the other. I am not aware of ever having used a profane expletive in my life, but I would have the charity to excuse those who may have done so, if they were in charge of a train of Mexican pack mules at the time. When asked why he never cursed, Grant replied, "I never learned to swear. When a boy, I seemed to have an aversion to it. And when I became a man, I saw the folly of it. I have always noticed, too, that swearing helps to rouse a man's anger. And when a man flies into a passion, his adversary who keeps cool always gets the better of him. In fact, I can never see the use of swearing. I think it is the case with many people who swear excessively, that it is a mere habit, and that they do not mean to be profane, but to say the least, it is a great waste of time. Here's the lesson. There really is no excuse for having a foul mouth. Even if you only occasionally resort to profanity, you still will almost certainly make some of the men and women around you uncomfortable. This in turn will cost you their respect and reduce your effectiveness. If you curse for effect, stop it. It's counterproductive. On the other hand, if you curse because you can't control your temper, then you shouldn't be a manager. You should be a manager. You shouldn't be a manager. I don't know. I do think it is somewhat easy to just drop into an expletive or two. I try to reduce as much in my writing myself. More so because it's a bit of a challenge to find something else to say. And I kind of like to rise to that challenge. And because people use it so much these days that it's actually kind of refreshing when you don't see it. But hey, if you like to swear, go right ahead. Doesn't bother me none. I think it seems a little prudish to be like, don't do it. You're nasty if you don't. But whatever. That's just me. Let's move on to number 9, shall we? When assigned a supporting role. As regimental quartermaster at the time of the Battle of Monterey, Grant's orders were to remain in camp and protect his regiment's supplies and other property. Ooh, what is that? General Order number 1? Number 2? Take charge of this post and all government property within view? I can't recall. I know the order, but not the number. Let's get back to number 9. My curiosity got the better of my judgment, and I mounted a horse and rode to the front to see what was going on. I had been there but a short time when an order to charge was given, and lacking the moral courage to return to camp where I had been ordered to stay, I charged with the regiment. The lesson. It's natural for you to always want to be where the action is, but if you are assigned a supporting role, carry it out to the best of your ability. Butting in and drawing attention to yourself will not only keep you from doing your job, it will divert others from doing theirs. Number 10. Create a thinking machine. Watching the surrender of the Mexican garrison at Monterey on September 24th, 1846, a young Lieutenant Grant was struck by how little interest the men before me had in the results of the war and how little knowledge they had of what it was all about. Years later, Grant would describe the Union Army that marched through Georgia as having been made up of as good soldiers as ever trod the earth, because they not only worked like a machine, but the machine thought. Our armies were composed of men who were able to read, men who knew what they were fighting for, and so necessarily must have been more than equal to men who fought merely because they were brave and because they were thoroughly drilled and inured to hardship. Here's the lesson. Empowerment begins with knowledge, which goes beyond job training. No matter how well you teach your people to do their jobs, if they don't understand the organization's mission and the important role they play in carrying it out, all you will have is people who act like non-thinking robots, and you will always be outperformed by the competitors who empower their staff to think for themselves. All right. That is numbers 5 through 10 of the Lessons in Leadership by General Ulysses S. Grant. Well, not by him, but of him, I suppose. All right, let's get on the stream. All right.